So most recently, um, I was living with what people or what they considered themselves as to be highly educated people. But so for the past 5 years, I've been living at in different people's homes. Um, the first home I moved back to my hometown. So the first home I lived in was with a doctor. They gave me a lot of insight on how I saw the pharmaceutical industries and the hospitals and stuff like that. They were able to give me insight into that, verifying a lot of questions that I had. So I lived there for around 2 years. Learned a lot um, about how that level of money behaves, how they interact, their morals, their outlooks, how they see other people. You kind of become part of the family when you're in that type of a situation. The way that when you become like a person living in that type of environment with people, you become part of their family. It's essentially what happens. So yeah, that experience, yeah, gave me a lot of understanding. During that time is when I started learning about yoga and meditation, and so that was the beginning of my transformation. That was kind of introduced to me there. Very very just it was just there. They're not like, that's not where. Anyways, there's more to this story. Like, you can go in very many directions. I'm just trying to stay on how and where I accumulated information. So the uh, the other uh, amazing relationship where I gathered a lot of information was from an ex or a retired school teacher who was also on the board, patients advisory board for the hospital. So those two people they actually ended up meeting because they were kind of on similar paths. My the doctor roommate and this gentleman ended up having a meeting because I recognized that they were kind of trying to achieve the same goal, bettering the system essentially is people that I attract. So anyways, he was also the one of the first teachers to have computer um, lab in the school. So he had the first computer lab in the city of Sudbury when it came to the educational sector of the school. So he's very in tune with technology. And yeah, I got to hang out with him for 2 years before he passed away. And during that time, again, verifying a lot of questions that I had about how things were in the system was and all that kind of stuff. Very highly educated people. And then the last encounter was with a full-time student. He's been a student as long as I've known him. We're I think 10 years different. He's turning 40, or they are turning 40. I gotta practice. They are turning 40, and yeah, it's pretty much been their life is a student. Still, I'm not sure. Anyway, studying consciousness, the mind, and other fascinating, amazing, like just the experience that I had there was by far the best experience that you could ever ask for the circumstances and everything that, like, just a person such as myself coming in to learn as much as I can, because that's what I do is I learn as much as I can from people. And I learned a lot about ego, bringing it to a whole new level. My inner self, learning about myself, was brought to another level, which priceless. So these experiences. Oh, and there was also, sorry, there's two other minds that were there that had a lot of influence. There's many that passed through. I can't like it's endless, but um, yeah. So one was heavily into music, teach, just loved it, and the other loved children and helping, uh, understanding psychology to its highest level, and that's the goals at least that were being achieved around me, where I was programming, kind of just making my way through life is what I've done, just making enough to survive and kind of passing through trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Right, because like it, nothing makes any sense, but you're kind of like, okay, well, I can make money, I can survive, and just continue meeting these people and learning, continuously analyzing and trying to figure out, okay, how does all this happen, right? So this video is kind of like how does a person without an education able to speak and talk about these type of topics? And that is what the unfortunate turning stone was in my last relationship. And it caught me off guard because that's where I learned about ego. And at the end of the whole relationship where I was learning ego, it actually seems that ego is what got in the way of the relationship, which is neat because it makes sense. Because there's levels, like there's points, and ego is in everything. So however you look at it, if a relationship's going to break, it's going to be because of ego, and that's just how it is, right? And it's unfortunate that there's a break in the relationship, and can it be fixed? I don't see why not. Like, it doesn't make any. I wasn't the direction that it went. It just went. I just kind of went with the flow. It was just like a whole bunch of ting 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 ting, and but from my understanding, I was freaking people out. I didn't have an education, but I was saying things of a higher education, and I think it caused confusion because when you're identifying things, but yet you didn't go to school for them, and that's what I found fascinating at the beginning, is because when I first started learning about the studies that they were doing in university, it was interesting because it was stuff I had already understood. And at the beginning, it was like, oh, you should come watch then. But near the ending, after realizing what has been going on, like having this insight and then piecing and then getting the final pieces to a puzzle that you've been trying to put together since, like, for over 20 years, I've been trying to piece this puzzle together. And when you finally get the final pieces, you think you're not going to be excited. You've been listening for 5 years or more, because that was pretty much all you could ever do at this point, because you talk so much that you talked your way into a point where you just can't talk anymore, and all you're doing is listening. And essentially that's what's been happening for the past 6 years, since 2013, is I've been listening. I was done and I listened, and then all of a sudden, at the end, when I decided to make some, whoa, check this out, it freaked people right out. Like, it literally just demolished what I had perceived as, wow, here is where change is going to happen. We're all in this mindset, and there's a group of us that are on the same mindset, to a degree. People never really ever have been. I have yet to meet someone on like, boom, yep, let's just go with what, like, this is, we're both on the same mindset, 100%. Not, I don't think 100% is achievable for any. That's probably probably an unrealistic number, but at least 80%. That has to be understanding of what's going on would be cool. I usually land in the 40% range with people. No, okay, sorry. 40% is high. But my last relationship with these people was 40% range. And that was the highest I've been in. Like, and then 30s, like, 35, 30s was on average from what I've surrounded myself around recently, because that was it, right? That was at the point where, okay, what you need to do now is start surrounding yourself with like-thinking people. Well, finding like-thinking people, you got to kind of like lower or like, because you're rise, right? It's about rising. So you're here, like you're way up here, and you're trying to find like-thinking people. Well, there's a big gap. So you're like down here all of a sudden, you're trying to find like-thinking people, and then you find that. And that's the last spot I was at. That's as close as I've ever gotten to like thinking. And it was the greatest experience, and I can't wait to find to create that environment where it's higher than 40% around, because that's going to be amazing. But okay, so with that said, where do you get this mind? Like, how can a person who hasn't gone to high school, hasn't gone to university, but yet have the insight like that? And that's technology, okay? And I've always been involved in technology, but there's still people are, okay, how though? And I ask myself this question. This is how I know the answer, right? Because I'm asking myself questions about myself. So to ask that and have other people answer it doesn't really make much sense, because you're asking yourself now. I'm now almost a 50-year-old standing here going, how did I end up with this mindset, right? I'm the one who's able to answer that the best, okay? And I think people forget about that, right? And that has a lot to do with television and the way that the media shapes your conditional thinking. Even though you don't realize this is happening, you see similar situations where you identify how people are behaving, and you relate that to an experience that you had. But even though the experience you had isn't real, that's still how you identify that behavior, because you've seen it in such a way that it was real to you. For an example, mental illness. So you'll see a character on television who behaves a certain way, and then you'll see usually an authoritative figure that is highly respected diagnose that character. So now, when in real life, when you see that type of behavior, you automatically know what the behavior is. That's conditional thinking, okay? And that's evolved throughout history. But identifying that is important to understand how this whole box was created and shaped. And back to the box, that's the whole big picture here, is explaining the box and showing the box. It's going to take some time. There's a lot of little details that have to be understood first, but where my mind was trained or where I trained myself. I did this by playing video games. Now, at the beginning, the video games were very simple, and I was like 8. So here you are playing, or I wrote my first line of code, then I started playing video games. These games were just learning how to maneuver, pretty much like asteroids comes to mind, and there was some other games. You had a spaceship, turn around in circles, you had to shoot things. You're not learning much in those games other than how to hand-eye coordination, which is important. And you're learning hand-eye coordination like better than you could in any other type of hand-eye or finger-eye coordination available at the time. That's the best, right? So video games gave me that, but I also played outdoors a lot. So at that time, it wasn't just video games. It was like you got a half hour of video games 3 times a week, 4 times a week. If you were lucky, you got to watch TV once during school, and then the rest you were outside. So it wasn't like video games today at that time. How kids are today. They're way more into it. The virtual world. They're right into that. So for that, video games kind of remained the same. They were like Jumpman type games, jumping over things, dodging under things, blah, 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 blah. But then I think my first, so we're learning how to play Monopoly and stuff like that type of logic. But then they came out with this game, this game called Aerobiz. Don't know if I still have the search up. Aerobiz was by Nintendo, Super Nintendo at the time. So this was this game intrigued me. So you're running a corporation and a business, airlines, around the world, and you're competing against other airlines, and you have to create the most successful airline, essentially. So Nintendo came out with this game, and I mastered it within a couple weeks. Done. Game's over. Mastered it. Won it. Beat it. Ching. Boom. Amazing. But that experience playing that game gave me a business logical course better than any business course in the universities, colleges in the world, man. Like, that was hardcore management and in microseconds, moving your hands. The virtual reality of that business for a child at my age playing that game put me at a level of business understanding all around me, higher than my parents, than my grandparents, everybody. All of a sudden, you're just, boom, you're at this level of understanding business. And that's real. So next comes, later on throughout my evolutionary process of playing video games, Microsoft decides to release some game called Age of Empires, where you actually start off in the Stone Age and build an empire to today. Or not, sorry. You build an empire throughout the ages. I think it ended at, Age Empires ended at, I don't know, stone or no, we had castles at the end. Whatever. The point is that you actually see, you kind of get a little dab of what we consider to be history, or what we're taught history is, through this game, right? Because it was war, battle, we need land, we need resources, here's what the world's all about. So that is what that taught. About resources and the planet and the earth and the fighting and the doom, and then what the first version, the game, we came to a stalemate because I couldn't I had all the resources, but he had all the bigger buildings. He had aged faster, or they had aged faster, so I couldn't get in to their area. And for that, that's essentially what happened. And then in the next version, they made it so there was a market. Now the game didn't have to come to an end. You had a market. You were selling and making things. You were making products. You could do things. So it kind of gave Microsoft, or that video game shaped your mind on how easily manipulative the world is, kind of, sort of, or how you grow through the ages, and how we evolved with technology. It shapes your mind with that type of understanding of history, according to what we're taught. So anyways, so then Civilizations comes out. Well, Civilizations is a little different now. Civilizations is a more higher level of city management, right? And uh, Sim Cities is another example of building cities, making sure you have proper schools, education systems, stuff like that. Great game for understanding that. Again, Civilizations taught that you didn't have to fight. There was dictatorship, and you could win wars differently than with violence and aggression, and that's what Civilizations kind of brought to the table. So SimCity is how to organize a city. Um, Quake, Quake, I think, brought the idea of real sport. It had the physics, how you could move like in a strifing physical way faster. If you had better flow, you could run faster than the other player, and you can do more magnificent jumps if you had rhythm and flow. It was important to have that, and that's what Quake brought to the table. Whoa! I mean, we computers are getting that fast, and we can have this, and that was actually, I want to say, they pioneered, or were one of the first pioneers of professional video gaming like we have today. They started that, and yeah. So after Quake, I didn't think there would be any other video. Oh, World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft taught how to bring together magnificent groups. Like you had 40 people on one server, and from all over the place, with different egos, different mentalities, different ideas, together randomly, boom, and maintain that is where that's the skills that I got from that game. And we did pretty good. Shut down servers. I had people begging. They would create different characters, come onto our server, and can you just stop? It was fun, and these are the skill sets that you gain from playing these, because you're literally in a virtual world managing 40 minds, right? You're in a virtual world creating a business. You're in a virtual world, but you're repeating it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Where a person gets one shot at building a business, sure, they get a little bit of education in the background, to help them get started, but they never got to simulate and then re-simulate and then learn from those mistakes and re-simulate. So that's where a lot of my education derives from, is video games. And it's amazing how that happens, because wait till you hear about the music. Anyways, I'm just going to leave it at that. The video games is one huge part of the way my mind works and what I understand and how I understand things. that's where my education mindset comes from. And I assure you that the, a lot of these business games that I played throughout my development, there was a train one. The train one was interesting. Forget the name of it, but yeah, you had to build trains and stuff. There was the farming ones, all kinds, all kinds. So when you kind of learn all this kind of stuff, you're seeing things at a higher risen level, and that's just how it works. Thank you.